Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Daily English Channel, where we explore the English language and the fascinating world around us. I'm Amelia.
Hello, Amelia, and hello to all our brilliant listeners joining us today. It is absolutely wonderful to be here.
I am so glad you are here, Michael. You look a little distracted today, if I am being honest.
I am distracted, Amelia, and I am also a little, guilty.
Guilty? That is an interesting way to start a Monday. What happened?
Well, I had a very important report to finish this weekend, a deadline on Friday and everything.
Oh, and did you finish it?
I finished it, but only at 11:30 on Sunday night.
Michael, the deadline was Friday.
I am aware, Amelia, I am very much aware.
So what were you doing between Friday and Sunday night?
Well, on Friday evening, I told myself I deserved a little rest first. I would start fresh on Saturday morning.
That sounds reasonable so far.
On Saturday morning, I decided I needed to organize my desk before I could focus properly.
Ah, and how long did that take?
3 hours, and then I was hungry, so I made a very elaborate lunch.
Of course you did.
And then after lunch, I felt a little sleepy, so I thought a short nap would help me concentrate better.
A short nap.
4 hours.
Michael, that is not a nap, that is a commitment.
I know, and by Sunday evening, I was in a complete panic and I wrote the entire report in 3 hours while drinking 4 cups of coffee.
Michael, that is a perfect description of procrastination.
It is embarrassing, Amelia. I do this every single time.
You are absolutely not alone. And that, everyone, is our topic for today, the psychology of procrastination, why we delay, and how to finally stop.
I personally need this conversation more than anyone listening right now.
I think many of our listeners will relate deeply to this. It is one of the most universal human struggles.
It really is, and what I find fascinating is that I am not a lazy person. I work hard. I care about my results.
And that is actually the key insight, Michael. Procrastination is not about laziness at all.
It isn't?
No. Psychologists now understand that procrastination is fundamentally an emotional regulation problem, not a time management problem.
Can you explain that? Because I always assumed I just needed a better schedule.
So did most people for a very long time. But research shows that when we procrastinate, we are not avoiding the task itself. We are avoiding the negative emotions associated with that task.
Such as what kind of emotions?
Anxiety about whether we will do it well enough, self-doubt, fear of judgment, even boredom. The brain perceives the task as a threat and tries to protect us from those uncomfortable feelings.
So when I was organizing my desk instead of writing my report, my brain was actually protecting me?
In a misguided way, yes. It was offering you a task that felt manageable and gave you a sense of accomplishment without the associated anxiety of the actual work.
That is both fascinating and deeply concerning about my own mind.
It gets more interesting. There is a concept called the present bias. Our brains are wired to prioritize immediate comfort over future rewards.
So the relief of not starting the report right now feels more real than the reward of finishing it next week.
Precisely. The future version of yourself who has to deal with the consequences feels like a completely different person to your brain.
That explains why I always think future Michael can handle it. Future Michael is very capable.
And then future Michael arrives, and he is just as overwhelmed as past Michael was.
Future Michael is always furious at past Michael.
This is actually a documented psychological phenomenon. Researchers call it the empathy gap. We consistently underestimate how stressed, tired, or unprepared our future self will be.
So I am not just disorganized, I am genuinely bad at predicting my own future emotional state.
Most humans are. It is not a personal failing. It is a feature of how our brains evolved.
That is strangely comforting. You know, Amelia, I have a confession related to this.
Oh, tell me.
Not yet. I want to hear more first, but I will share it later.
Mysterious. I like it. So, Michael, do you recognize any particular patterns in your own procrastination?
Absolutely. I have noticed that I procrastinate most on tasks that feel vague or undefined.
That is a very astute observation, and it connects directly to another psychological principle, the ambiguity effect.
What is the ambiguity effect?
When a task lacks clear boundaries or a defined first step, the brain perceives it as significantly more threatening than it actually is. The uncertainty itself becomes the obstacle.
So, when my report just said, write a comprehensive analysis, my brain had no idea where to begin, and so it chose to clean the kitchen instead.
Exactly. The kitchen had a clear starting point, a clear ending point, and an immediately visible result.
The report had none of those things until I actually sat down and broke it apart.
And once you broke it apart and started writing, how did it feel?
Honestly, after about 20 minutes, I was completely absorbed. I forgot to feel anxious.
That experience has a name. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called it flow, a state of deep focus and engagement where self-consciousness disappears entirely.
Flow. I have heard that word, but I never connected it to procrastination.
The cruel irony of procrastination is that the state we are trying to avoid, sitting down and engaging with difficult work, is often the very thing that produces the most satisfaction and relief.
So we suffer for hours avoiding something that would have made us feel better almost immediately.
That is the paradox precisely. The avoidance creates far more suffering than the task itself.
That is genuinely painful to acknowledge.
You know, Michael, if this conversation is resonating with you and helping you understand yourself better, please give this video a like.
Yes, and subscribe to Mr. Daily English channel if you have not already. We are so grateful for your support.
And we have a small challenge for today's episode. If you are still with us, comment the words "not tomorrow" in the comments below.
Not tomorrow. I love that. It's basically the opposite of everything my brain tells me.
It really is. So, Michael, let us talk about the different types of procrastinators, because not everyone delays for the same reason.
Oh, there are different types?
Researchers have identified several distinct profiles. The first is the perfectionist procrastinator.
I feel personally targeted already.
The perfectionist delays because they are waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect level of inspiration. They are so afraid of producing imperfect work that they produce no work at all.
That is extraordinarily accurate for me. I once spent an entire evening choosing the right font for a document before writing a single word.
The font?
It needed to be right, Amelia.
The second type is the overwhelmed procrastinator. This person looks at a large task and feels so paralyzed by its scale that they cannot identify a starting point.
So they do nothing because everything feels too enormous.
Precisely. The third type is the pleasure seeker. This person is not particularly anxious. They simply find the available alternatives far more enjoyable than the work at hand.
Ah, that was me on Saturday afternoon watching 3 episodes of a documentary about ancient civilizations.
Ancient civilizations are genuinely fascinating.
They really are, but they did not help my report.
And the fourth type, which I find most interesting, is the rebel procrastinator.
The rebel? That sounds almost admirable.
This person delays as an unconscious act of resistance. They resent being told what to do, even by themselves. Setting a deadline feels like an imposition of control, and delay becomes a form of autonomy.
So they procrastinate to feel free.
In a deeply counterproductive way, yes. They feel a brief sense of control by resisting the task, but ultimately they are controlled entirely by their avoidance.
That is a fascinating self-defeating mechanism. I think I have elements of that too.
Most chronic procrastinators are a combination of several types. It is rarely just one.
So now that we understand why we procrastinate, what actually helps? Because I have tried many things and most of them have not worked.
That is the most important question, and the answer begins with one critical realization. Willpower alone is almost completely ineffective against procrastination.
That explains a great deal about my life.
Telling yourself to simply try harder or be more disciplined misunderstands the problem entirely. If procrastination is an emotional response, the solution must also address emotions.
So what does address it effectively?
The first and most evidence-based strategy is called implementation intention. Instead of saying, "I will work on my report this weekend," you say, "I will sit at my desk at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning and write the opening paragraph for 20 minutes.
So you eliminate all ambiguity completely.
You give your brain a specific time, a specific location, and a specific and very small first action. Research shows this dramatically increases the probability of actually starting.
Because the brain no longer has to make any decisions in the moment.
Precisely. Decision fatigue is a real phenomenon. Every choice we make depletes our mental energy. When the decision is already made, the resistance is significantly reduced.
That is remarkably practical. What else?
The second strategy is self-compassion, and I know that might sound surprising in this context.
The second strategy is self-compassion, and I know that might sound surprising in this context.
Studies by Dr. Kristen Neff and others have shown that people who respond to their own procrastination with harsh self-criticism actually procrastinate more, not less.
Because the shame itself becomes another negative emotion to avoid.
Exactly. The guilt and self-judgment create additional emotional weight around the task, making it even more threatening to approach.
So being kind to myself about having delayed actually makes it easier to start.
Consistently, yes. Acknowledging that you procrastinated, understanding why without excessive judgment, and then redirecting forward is far more effective than spending an hour feeling terrible about yourself.
I have spent considerable time feeling terrible about myself, and I can confirm it has never once helped me start a report.
The third strategy is environmental design. Rather than relying on motivation or willpower, you restructure your environment to make the desired behavior easier and the avoidance behavior harder.
Can you give a practical example?
Certainly. If you know you will reach for your phone instead of working, you put the phone in a different room before you sit down. You do not rely on resisting the temptation in the moment. You remove the temptation entirely from the environment.
Because the version of me sitting at my desk at 9 in the morning has considerably less willpower than the version of me planning the evening before.
That is an excellent way to put it. We make decisions for our future self when we have more clarity and less immediate temptation.
You know, Amelia, this connects to my confession I mentioned earlier.
Ah, yes, I have been waiting for this.
So I've been procrastinating about procrastinating.
I need you to explain that.
I have known about this problem for years. I have bought 3 books about productivity. I have watched countless videos. I have made beautiful color-coded schedules.
And?
I have never actually implemented any of it consistently. I research solutions to procrastination instead of applying them. It's procrastination wearing a very convincing disguise.
That's called productive procrastination, and it's remarkably common with intelligent people.
Productive procrastination. It sounds almost respectable.
It feels respectable because you are technically doing something related to the problem, reading about focus, organizing your system, planning your approach, but none of it moves the actual work forward.
It's the intellectual version of cleaning your desk.
Precisely, and it's particularly seductive because it allows us to feel busy and virtuous while still avoiding the discomfort of the real work.
I feel extremely seen right now.
We all have versions of this. Mine is making extremely detailed lists of everything I need to do instead of simply beginning one thing.
Your lists are very beautiful, though.
They are very beautiful and completely counterproductive when I spend 40 minutes on them.
So what is the core principle that ties all of these strategies together?
I think the deepest insight is this. You cannot wait to feel ready. You cannot wait for motivation to arrive before you begin. The motivation almost always comes after you start, not before.
Action precedes motivation.
That is the principle that changes everything when you truly internalize it. We have the causality backwards. We think we need to feel motivated in order to act, but in reality, taking even the smallest action generates the momentum and the emotional shift that we were waiting for.
That is why once I finally opened my report document on Sunday evening, I finished it in 3 hours.
The starting was the hardest part. Everything after that was simply continuation.
I wish I had started on Friday.
Future Michael wishes the same thing.
Future Michael always does.
You know, I want to share something personal before we finish today.
Please do.
I used to procrastinate enormously on creative work, writing, preparing new content, anything that required originality.
Really?
You always seem so organized and productive.
What you see is the result. You do not see the 2 hours I spent the evening before convincing myself I was not ready, not inspired, not good enough.
And what changed?
I stopped waiting to feel confident before I began. I started treating creative work like a commitment rather than an inspiration. I sit down at the same time every day, regardless of how I feel.
And does the inspiration come?
Sometimes immediately, sometimes after 20 minutes of very mediocre work, but it always comes eventually. And the days when it feels hardest to begin are often the days the work turns out best.
Because you pushed through the resistance instead of surrendering to it.
Exactly. The resistance is not a signal that you are not ready. It is simply the brain's habitual response to discomfort. You can acknowledge it and begin anyway.
That is genuinely one of the most useful things I have heard in a long time.
Well, everyone, we hope this conversation has given you not just new vocabulary, but a genuinely new perspective on something you face every day.
Yes, and remember, understanding why you procrastinate is only useful if you apply it. Do not let this become productive procrastination.
Before you go, please subscribe to Mr. Daily English channel and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it today.
And don't forget to comment "Not tomorrow" below. Let us know you're choosing to act.
We read every single comment and they mean the world to us.
Thank you for spending this time with us today. Go and do the thing you've been putting off.
Yes, you already know what it is.
Until next time, everyone, goodbye.
Bye for now. See you in the next episode.